ADHD. So many people are getting diagnosed at the moment. It's no coincidence. There are a lot of missing links when it comes to understanding why this happens, why this is an epidemic, and the link between autism, depression, hyperactivity, eating disorders, anxiety, lack of emotional control, lack of focus, and also procrastination and OCD. There's so many things that we deal with as mothers and that our children are dealing with increasingly. And there are some common reasons why, but also some underlying biochemical and neurological and other reasons why this happens more and more, and something you can do to get a better quality of life if you have a child with the symptoms. And also if you are dealing with anxiety, depression, hyperactivity, lack of focus, and procrastination. I have a list here of things. Impulsivity, picky eating is also linked to this. So let's talk about this. My own personal story is that I have two children who are dealing with this or were dealing with the symptoms that were super problematic. There was a word there that I couldn't remember. One diagnosed, one with the same symptoms but undiagnosed, and for sure I have the same underlying issues. And I also have some of the symptoms that come with it if I'm not well regulated. And I want to talk about what does that mean? How did we deal with all these things? The frustration, addictions to screen and sugar, the hyperactivity, lack of emotional control, frustration, sensitivities to texture and taste, picky eating, OCD tendencies, and this extreme level of activity, and time optimism as well. What did we do, and what's the deal with this? Why does it look like so many people are getting diagnosed? Well, there are actually 5 underlying reasons for these symptoms that are common in both autism, depression, ADHD, OCD, and many of the things that we're dealing with as women as well, in the autism mom community and in the ADHD mom community as well. So my children, one was diagnosed with severe autism as well, and as we unscrambled the underlying reasons why those symptoms were so extreme, he then gradually lost the autistic symptoms like rigidity, lining things up, screaming, tantrums, eloping, nonverbal autism, echolalia, many of the things like ritualistic behavior, and it turned more and more into what someone would diagnose as ADHD. He actually had that diagnosis as well, but that was the only thing that was left in the end to deal with. So it's almost like something is going on, like it's on the same spectrum. And for us as moms, we can experience it as eating disorders, depression, procrastination, lack of ability to understand how long a task will take, multitasking, frustration, aggression, OCD tendencies, perfectionism, competitive behavior, and sensitivities as well, to sound, to people, to texture, whatever it is. So what are those 5 underlying reasons that I want to talk about in this video that it doesn't seem like the diagnosis system or the holistic health community are addressing? So the number one thing that we need to look at when we have these issues is actually a working memory and a neurological component that needs to be addressed. So with these ADHD symptoms, it has been shown that there's a disruption in working memory. Working memory is best described, I've heard it best described as how many types of information can you have online at the same time without getting overwhelmed and frustrated. So it's how much can you deal with. And it's about 7 different things that you can store in your working memory before you run out of capacity and gets into frustration, bad decision making, anger, frustration, and lack of understanding, lack of comprehension, actually cognitive decline. One of the things that Andrew Huberman has covered a lot on his podcast is that decline or that compromised working memory problem is the same thing that happens with dementia. So age-related cognitive decline is the same thing that these children, our children who are hyperactive, who have ADHD, it's the same thing that they're dealing with. And so what helps someone with an age-related cognitive decline is shown to also improve focus and control and emotional control and lower the frustration levels for children and adults with ADHD. So one of the things that I've seen work consistently in my community, and let me just say, don't diagnose yourself with either autism or ADHD. Make sure that you go somewhere to get that diagnosis. Though I want to say, because it does need someone with expertise to actually do that, we shouldn't be self-diagnosing. I do want to say that they don't look at these biochemical aspects that lead to the same type of symptoms. So that's just something to bear in mind. They don't look at that in the psychiatric system and in the special needs system either. So one of the things that I've seen work for my children and for hundreds of women and children in my community is physical exercise and movement outdoors, such as spinning, cross-coordination, eye-tracking exercises, jumping, crawling, standing on one leg. Many of the things that we would have done were we living the way that we were supposed to live in the old days, barefoot, outside, crawling, creeping, playing games with each other. The more indoors and passive our lifestyle has become, the more frequent and more prevalent these problems in society, such as ADHD, hyperactivity, lack of learning, and learning difficulties have become, and mental health issues as well. It's estimated that up to 1 in 10 children fit the diagnosis and the symptom, the picture of symptom, like the plethora of symptoms that defines ADHD. That's a lot, and these are just the ones that actually get into the system and they are noticed. So get outside, do some playing outside, some crawling in trees, and make sure that you get a lot of outdoor movement every single day. Number 2 reason why we have ADHD problems, it's been shown that these children have low dopamine levels, and adults as well. When we have low dopamine levels, dopamine is a neuromodulator, and it's responsible for the ability to pay attention, the ability to focus, and also the ability to exclude unimportant information. And so when you have low dopamine, you also tend to have less joy, less motivation. And for children and adults with ADHD, this can explain why Ritalin works, because it increases dopamine. And it can also explain why there's a propensity for addiction to screens and gaming and sugar, because they all are stimulating when it comes to increasing levels of dopamine. Short term, that is, because it will then lead to a drop and feeling worse. But that's another video for another day. So dopamine is an issue. In my experience with working with moms in Barefoot Autism Warriors, the community and my program, my experience is that exposure to more of the things that we do outside, we do a lot of interventions that has to do with nature deficiency, and getting exposed to sunlight, for example, is something that increases levels of dopamine, or this feeling of reward. That's what the sunlight does to us. That's why we're so attracted to the sun. Movement, exercise also improves that baseline of dopamine, the baseline level of dopamine that that gives us that balance and joy and motivation and focus. So again, back to basics, back to the way that we are intended to live. That's a really good idea when it comes to these low dopamine problems, low dopamine induced problems. Number 3 is really interesting. This is based on William Walsh and his work, and he's been studying up to, I think it's 5,500 people with ADHD in his non-profit research organization. And he's noticed that 68% of these children have copper overload, and that's linked to the hyperactivity, the lack of focus, the anxiety, and as also aggression, those emotional outbursts that can be linked to copper overload. And so this is really interesting because we know that gluten-free diets are really popular right now. We know that supplements to increase and boost hair growth and nails are full of copper. We know that the IUDs, the copper devices that you have inside your uterus to prevent yourself from being pregnant, and many of the contraceptives contain copper. We also know that there's a lot of copper in plant-based foods. So we have a lot of things that we are ingesting on a regular basis as women, and probably as children too, if we're avoiding dairy, if we're avoiding meat, if we are avoiding gluten. Sometimes we switch to these plant-based products that are totally rammed with copper. And it's not just ADHD symptoms that will be causing. It is also linked to severe depression, postnatal depression, and other mental health challenges. And it's not something that I would suggest you regulate on your own. You got to work with someone who knows how to guide you and become an expert in this yourself, because so many of the functional medicine practitioners don't know how to regulate this. And if you dump copper too quickly, you can actually end up in a psychosis. So this is not medical advice at all. This is just strictly educational. This is a big missing link in the diagnosis and treatment plans for these issues and for these children and for women with ADHD as well. So it doesn't really help to get a diagnosis and to get help from the established system if you're still ingesting or exposing yourself to things that will increase copper levels. Okay. So there's also often fortified foods that our children eat, and a lot of grains and seeds and nuts and stuff that's laden with copper as well. Number 4 is nature deficiency. So I mentioned that before, that there's a lot of sleep issues with ADHD, lots of lack of focus, and light deficiency, sunlight deficiency, lack of grounding, so that because our children live their lives ungrounded. They get up, they put their shoes on, they go to school. Even when they're exercising or playing outside, they wear rubber soles on their shoes, which means that they never ground to the earth. That way they cannot dump static electricity. And it's really, really an issue, because we're actually designed to sleep on the ground. We're designed to walk barefoot. We're designed to sleep grounded. That's how we charge the body, and that's how we dump static electricity as well. So grounding has been shown to help with focus, mood, sleep, inflammation, pain. And I do believe that these children are showing us the problems with the artificial indoor lifestyle that we have become so accustomed to. And one of the problems with this is the screens, social media. The addiction to screens and the addiction to sugar is linked to the low dopamine levels, but it's also linked to light deficiency, so that the body will try to crave sunlight, and because it's not getting the sunlight that it needs for the body to regulate all the body clocks, the clocks that are inside every organ, the body will then have a propensity or a try to compensate by being attracted to light that looks like daylight, such as the light that comes from screens. Screen time in itself is also linked to and proven to be linked to ADHD symptoms. So the more our children are inside, the more they are gaming, the worse their problems are gonna get. Last but not least, food and nutrition. It's been shown by pediatricians and neuropsychologists and psychiatrists that work with these children over and over again that many children benefit from a diet that's excluding certain foods that they are not tolerating very well. And I've heard Andrew Huberman talk about this on his podcast, and to me it's logical, because one of the things that I want to mention in connection with food and nutrition is that where 68% of the children with and adults with ADHD have copper overload, around 50% are undermethylated, which means they have high levels of histamine. And so if you have intolerances and you eat things that you're allergic to and things that are high in histamine, you will have less methyl. Undermethylation is linked to ADHD symptoms, perfectionism, rigidity, OCD, lack of focus, mood swings, big time mood swings, depression, and perfectionism and competitivity. But it's all competitiveness, and it's also linked to an intolerance to folates. It's a longer story, and I have several videos about this, how vegan diets are not for autism and absolutely not for ADHD if you have depression or mood swings as well. But so just to say that when you have undermethylation, which is something that 50% of these children and adults have, you will have a tendency to be more depressed, to have fertility issues, to experience birth complications and even stillborn babies and premature birth. So preemies, but it also increases the risk for having a child with behavioral and learning difficulties. So this is a huge issue, and it's highly underdiagnosed and undertreated and misunderstood. Most of the practitioners out there, even the ones that are trained by Walsh, who is the man behind this theory, many of them don't know how to regulate methylation in a safe way, because you also don't want to get into overmethylation, which is linked to a lot of other mental health issues. So it's really important to understand everything about your child's methylation status and your own, and what's some signs that you have blocked methylation and what are some signs that you have balanced it out. You can do that with food and nutrition actually, but it really requires that you understand this. This has nothing to do with taking an MTHFR test alone and base a protocol on that. In fact, many of the supplements and superfoods that we are eating and using in the health community will make undermethylation and therefore ADHD symptoms and symptoms of depression and these issues that I mentioned before, even cancer, the risk for cancer, worse. So it's also a really good idea. That's something that's clinically proven. It's not in scientific studies yet on a big scale. Smaller studies have shown it as well, that eating a diet that is free from refined sugars is a really good idea for these children. And I think also that's because it's something that Dr. Berenzi teaches inside my membership program. She also teaches you how to understand and regulate methylation for your child. But unstable blood sugar definitely increases symptoms. And unstable blood sugar also is linked to glutamate issues, which is a neuroexcitatory. So you got more ADHD symptoms the more unstable the blood sugar is. But in general, exclude those refined carbs, those junky foods, the white bread, the cereal, the sugar, the desserts. Minimize it anyway. So these were some of the unusual causes for ADHD and some unusual ways to deal with it. If you want to talk to me about this, you are more than welcome to send me an email, contact@barefootautismwarriors.com. The reason why I say send me an email is because I know I cannot help you if sending an email is an obstacle for you, because I will be asking you to change things that are much more complicated than sending an email. So this is a way of filtering out people that I know I don't want to work with. I only want to work with people who listen to this, hear this video, and take the initiative to go straight to the computer and send me an email. You can also find contact info on my website, barefootautismwarriors.com. I hope this was insightful, and I hope you'll share this video, subscribe to this channel, and give it a like, a thumbs up, so that I can spread the word even more about these things that people don't talk about.